Welcome to Post-War America, 1946 to 1955. This is Melinda Klein. The United States emerged from World War II with an enhanced reputation as the world's most powerful industrial and military nation. This war had finally ended the Great Depression and brought prosperity to most Americans. Also, the war increased the power of the federal government. During the war, Americans saw payroll deduction in the form of income tax, which symbolized the growth of a federal bureaucracy. Lastly, the war ended U.S. isolationism, making the nation into a dominant player in world affairs and a leader as a global power. Of the nations who fought in the war, the U.S. suffered the least. After a decade and a half, the U.S. became economically stable in the post-war years. In comparison to the standard of living in other Western industrial nations, life was better in the U.S., with a new middle-class suburban housing spread, fast food establishments, shopping centers, and other material reminders that the economy was strong in this nation. However, beneath this placid exterior lay another story, another culture, and there were signs of discontent. In the 1950s, it was obvious. Number one, the divorce rate was up, comprising 30% of marriages that had gone bad. Number two, blacks spoke out against segregation and inequality. Number three, Cold War politics began against one of the most powerful emerging world nations, the USSR, Communist Russia. Most Americans believe that after the war, good times were ahead. How can this be measured? This belief in the future caused changes in family patterns. A baby boom among white, prominently Protestant, and middle and working class people were having more babies than they had since the mid-19th century. This baby boom generation grew up in the 1960s, lived through the hippie years, the Vietnam War, the Cold War, and now are retiring or on the edge of retirement. This generation in our post-recent history made an impact on American society. They had new questions about the economy, politics, the responsibilities of citizenship, and the nation's role. A post-war housing boom also fed economic growth as home ownership rose from 53% in 1945 to 62% in 1960. Much of this came from the GI Bill, a veteran benefit from 1944 still used today. In addition to giving returning servicemen, regardless of race or rank, priority for many jobs and providing educational benefits, it offered low-interest home loans. This offered millions of former servicemen of all social classes a share of the American dream, home ownership. As U.S. corporations changed after the war, so did the world of work. Reversing a 150-year trend after World War II, the U.S. became less a goods producer and more of a service provider. By 1956, a majority of American workers held white-collar jobs, and clerical workers increased and factory workers were reduced. However, office management and clerical workers were expected to think, dress, and act the same. Corporations preached sameness, teamwork, and appropriate standards of conduct. For blue-collar workers, their lives were made more comfortable as unions grew in popularity and strength, offering better salaries and benefits. However, about 40% of the national workforce, comprising millions of workers, toiled as farm laborers, dime store clerks, and taxi drivers in jobs that paid low wages, were unstable, and thus less secure. The post-war economic boom was intertwined with a series of demographic changes. The population grew dramatically and continued to move west, while millions of white Americans left cities to live in the new suburbs. New patterns of living revolving around television and other home appliances provided by advances in technology came to characterize the consumer culture that dominated suburban living. In the 1950s and beyond, the birth rate soared as millions of Americans started families. The baby boom peaked in 1957. Between the 1940s and 1950s, the population increased by 10 million. The baby boom range is considered from 1945 to 1960. As the population moved west, another form of movement was taking place in which millions of white Americans fled inner cities to suburbs. These central cities became places where poor whites remain, attracted by low rents. Migrant residents and people new to the city took advantage of this phenomenon. Out of this shift, new suburban problems would develop and racial problems became more common. For people of means, cities were a place to work, but then at 5 o'clock they left to go to their suburban homes. For example, during the day in Manhattan's financial district, the noontime population was 1.5 million and dropped to 2,000 by midnight. Cities became evident of freeway systems like in Los Angeles to serve middle-class commuters and trains in the east where the weather was bad for months out of the year. In the post-war years, technology and more inventions revolutionized America. Some of the developments, like the use of atomic energy, followed war research. This growth in research and development led to the science laboratories that would create jet aircraft, satellites, nuclear weapons, and also consumer goods. Computers assisted research and development, but were a product before World War II. ENIAC, short for Electronic, Numerical, Integrator, and Computer, was the first large-scale electronic digital computer capable of being reprogrammed to solve a full range of computing problems, although earlier computers had been built with some of these properties. This early computer multiplied numbers in a split second, saving technicians work that would have taken thousands of man-hours to compute by hand. A key breakthrough for computers was a better transistor. This was developed at the Bell Labs in 1948. Computers became essential for space exploration. These mathematical calculations led astronauts to venture far beyond Earth. While Harry Truman won the 1948 election, it was Dwight D. Eisenhower who guided America as the 1950s president. By 1952, he won election and re-election in 1956. Truman's liberalism was replaced by Ike's Republican conservatism. He wanted to limit the president's role and convey to Americans to feel good about the economy.